The Devils had their home opener against Sheldon Keefe's former team, and unfortunately, it was not a good homecoming as the Devils fell to the Leafs by a score of 4-2. What went wrong? And also, let's hear from some Toronto players as to what their strategy was going up against this New Jersey team. We have a lot to break down in today's episode of Locked On Devils. Buckle up, everybody.
You're Locked On Devils, your daily podcast on the New Jersey Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, this is Bryce Salvador, and you're Locked On Devils with Trey Matthews.
Elliott scores! Oh, Stevens stepped up, nailed it. Brodor's got the puck. What a shot. The Devils win the Stanley Cup.
Alrighty now, what is up, New Jersey? Welcome back to the Locked On Devils podcast here at the Locked On Network. I'm your host, college hockey play announcer, Devils Wire of Pucks and Pitchforks, and also part-time Credential Media member, Trey Matthews, back from the Prudential Center. Opening night. Before I break down this game, the good, but mostly the bad, I first want to thank you guys. Whether it was outside the Prudential Center, inside the Prudential Center, as many of you know, I like to roam around in between periods to see who I could run into. A lot of you came my way and showed me a lot of love. I enjoyed covering my first home opener. It was a lot of fun. I loved the pregame festivities. I loved the mini concert. I loved seeing some of you at American Whiskey. It was definitely a fun event, despite the Devils dropping this one to the Toronto Maple Leafs by a score of 4-2. Yeah, not a pleasant homecoming for the players, myself, you, the fans. This game was an absolute stinker. In the first segment, I will share some of my main takeaways from the game. Then in the second segment, I will play some sound bites I obtained from the Maple Leafs locker room, because I don't know how many of you know this, but anytime I'm credentialed for a Devils game, they more likely than not lose the game. I have such bad luck. And before you blame me, let me just put this out there. I am not on the rink. I do not impact the game in that sort of way, but that's just the fact of the matter. Anytime I'm credentialed, the Devils will most likely lose a game. Take it how you want to take it. I'm getting a little tired of going into the locker room after a loss and not seeing a happy locker room. So something I've been doing more often is that if the Devils end up losing a game that I'm covering, I actually go into the opponent's locker room to get some sound bites. And then in the third and final segment, like I do with every post-game recap, I will compare the stats and give the Devils a letter grade. All right. As I said in the previous episode, this game, not a matter of life or death. Obviously, no playoff implications, but it does mean a lot to the Devils to put on a good performance in front of their home fans. Sheldon Keefe is going up against his former club. I'm sure he wants some vengeance on the organization, but for the time being, the Maple Leafs got the last laugh because they had a good outing from start to finish, and the Devils tried their best to take the wind out of the Maple Leaf sails, but to no avail. My main takeaway from the first period is that I thought the Devils actually got off to a great start in terms of pace and forechecking. I was actually talking to Jim Behringer of Full Press Hockey. He was sat next to me in the press box, and we both agreed that the Devils did look good from the opening puck drop. I saw players like Nico Hischier, Curtis Lazar, Stefan Noesen get into the mix, but it wasn't really translating to shots on Dennis Hildeby, who played in his first NHL game and is the third string goalie for the Maple Leafs, just to add insult to injury. And sometimes the Devils looked uncomfortable with their early passes. And as the period progressed, the Devils just got deeper and deeper and deeper into a hole. And towards the end of the first period, they were trailing 3-0. When you look at those three unanswered goals initially scored by the Maple Leafs, it was players from their bottom six: Max Pacioretty, Bobby McMann, who made his season debut, Steven Lorentz. Those were the three goal scorers for the Maple Leafs. And Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, at that point did not register a point. And here the Devils are down 3-0 in the opening period. Luckily, Jesper Bratt was able to get a power play goal to close out the first period. So it seemed like the Devils were regaining their momentum a little bit, right? Well, Curtis Lazar certainly had a lot of energy. I want to give a shout out to Curtis Lazar because he has my attention now. He impressed me with his play. Tough forechecks, a few big hits, making plays, not afraid to throw his weight around, and also not afraid to get into the grill of some of the Leafs players. And he was playing the full sheet of ice. Unfortunately, it wasn't uniform amongst his teammates. And I just wish that the Devils matched the dogged determination of Curtis Lazar, because I said it in the previous episode that my players to look out for in this game against the Leafs were going to be the bottom 6 guys for the Devils, the players that stepped up their game in Prague and were the unlikely heroes. And I'm glad that Curtis Lazar had a good game. I'm glad that another underrated player, Jonathan Kovacevic, he walked away with another point. He got an assist. But as the game progressed, it seemed like the Devils' energy declined. In between periods, I met up with Chico Resch, who is the color commentator on the Devils radio network alongside Matt Loughlin. And whenever I'm credentialed for a game, I always look for Chico, and he sort of teaches me the game in more detail. He's a former player. He's a former Stanley Cup champion. He's appeared on this show. I always listen when Chico is talking because he knows what the hell he's talking about. And Chico asked me in between the second and third period, what did I notice from both the Maple Leafs and the Devils? Because at this point, the Devils were trailing 4-2. Timo Meier was able to outskate many Leafs players, and with 5.3 seconds remaining in the middle period of frame, he sniped a goal and he cut the lead in half. But once again, the Devils gave up a goal to John Tavares, and it seemed like that was their demise, because it was just like, you should have scored that goal when you were down 3-1 because maybe you could have recaptured that momentum. But anyway, I'm talking to Chico Resch, and he asked me to share my thoughts on the game. And I said, look, Jacob Markstrom, was he his sharpest in this game? No. And I'm sure there's a couple he would have liked to have back. But at the same time, there were just way too many shots in the deep slot by the Leafs. It seemed like the Devils weren't really controlling their rebounds. They weren't really clearing, and any opportunity that the Leafs had, they would pounce on it, especially in the first period, which is why you saw some of their bottom 6 players net themselves a few points. And that's why the game was 3-0 for a majority of period 1. And Chico agreed with me, and he broke down that John Tavares goal because he felt as though that Markstrom just pushed up a little too much and didn't really flow into the movement to make the save. And as a result, his momentum was his downfall, and the puck was able to ricochet and go right past him. Once again, those were some of my main takeaways for most of the game, which is Jacob Markstrom wasn't his sharpest, but he didn't really have much help in front of him. The Devils' energy just decreased as the game progressed. It's not as bad as it was last year, but this wasn't really their best effort. I don't think they got much contribution from a lot of key guys. Like, I'm still waiting for Jack Hughes' first goal this season. And can we also talk about his face-off win percentage? It's at 13.6%. He finished this game 1 for 8 in face-offs. That needs to be talked about a little bit more. Shimo Nemeth, he hasn't really looked all that good either. And this might become an easy decision once Brett Pesce returns from injury, or a little down the road, Luke Hughes returns from injury, because Seamus Casey is looking solid and comfortable out there for the Devils. Overall, just not a good showing in front of their home fans for the Devils. And it was sort of a far cry as to what they were able to do in Prague. But that's bound to happen. Like I said, it's not life or death. There's no playoff implications. just wasn't a good outing. Go back to the drawing board, see what worked, what didn't work, and move on from there. The Devils weren't going to go 82-0. No team in the NHL has, and no team in the NHL ever will. This was an early season challenge for New Jersey, and unfortunately, this challenge, they fell short. That's going to happen, but how do you rebound from it? Because when this episode goes live, the Devils will have another game against the Washington Capitals, and then a few days later, you're going up against the Utah Hockey Club. Like I said, I was disappointed with their showing, but I'm not really going to overreact to it. All right, I'm going to play some sound bites momentarily, but before we continue, let me tell you guys about FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Visit FanDuel.com to look at the odds, and please remember to always gamble responsibly. Okay, I shared my thoughts as to what went wrong for the Devils, but let's hear it from a few different perspectives. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, I went into the Leafs locker room and I obtained some sound bites, and I asked them, how were they able to pounce on the Devils early, particularly with their bottom six, and what flaws did they see in the Devils' execution? Let's hear from alternate captain John Tavares. Here's what he had to say to me post-game.
3 goals by your bottom 6 in the first period. What specific flaws were you able to exploit from the Devils' execution?
I think we just wanted to jump on the forecheck, and all those guys, I think really all 4 lines can do that very, very well. Play a heavy game, wear teams down, force turnovers, and be strong around their net. We talk a lot about winning net fronts, and that certainly showed, I thought, in the first period, and they came up big, made some great plays, and built a nice lead for us.
Let me just say, if you're watching on YouTube, I apologize for the bad angle. Canada media is insane in a good way. Like, there's a lot of them, and you got to try to scurry to find an opening. And when it's a player like Tavares, a lot of people want to speak to him. It's always interesting to see the different media coverage for a Canadian team versus an American team. But anyway, digressing a little bit, here's what Bobby McMahon had to say post-game, and he made his season debut. Take a listen.
I think it was more just to focus on our game, focus on getting pucks behind their D, and if we do that, we have the bodies and the speed and the skill to make plays and find the back of the net.
Finally, here's what Steven Lorentz had to say about the Devils and their execution.
I mean, we just came out hard. I think they obviously had a tough schedule coming back from Europe, and I think this was their first game back. I'm not too positive, but I've been through something like that before, and it's kind of tough to get your legs back going. But it's the NHL, and you got to come prepared, and I think we did a good job just coming out firing on all cylinders. And like I said, it's not the prettiest game that our fourth line plays, but it's effective, and obviously you can see the results when we're rolling over. So we just got to keep that up.
I know he plays for the opposite team, but I do like that answer from Lorentz, and I like how he was very understanding with the Devils situation, which is they were in Prague recently, and now they're back in the States, and they're probably trying to get readjusted to the time zone, especially with the practices, the games, whatnot. It's an adjustment for a lot of people, but they're professionals. They'll get accustomed to it, but I'm glad that Lorentz was able to sort of relate to them on that sort of scale. I love that answer. And as a bonus, here's what Dennis Hildeby had to say about getting his first career win at the NHL level and going up against this Devils team.
Just for the debut to have gone this well, too, how happy are you with that?
I mean, of course, it's better. I think it was definitely not a perfect game. I think there's some things to work on, but yeah, it felt good. The guys played good, blocked a lot of shots too. So yeah, it's better than losing for sure. I always take that.
Remember any of your tough saves Anyone stand out?
I remember being on my stomach a lot. No, yeah, I mean, the one in the PK, they were nice, since it's kind of my fault we had that PK, so I was happy with that one.
Here are my thoughts after the game. I see a lot of people saying fire Sheldon Keefe or trade Jacob Markstrom. I get it. It's a joke from last year where people were like, fire Lindy Ruff, trade Vitek Vanecek, try to get a different goalie. But for anyone who is serious about it, just pump your brakes, like cool your jets. It's game 3 of 82. And like I said earlier in the episode, the Devils weren't going to go 82-0. No team in the NHL has ever gone undefeated. It's not going to happen. It's game 3 of many. And this was an early season challenge. And unfortunately, the Devils came out on the losing end, but at least they had some energy go their way when Jesper Bratt and Timo Meier got those last second goals after the first and second period, respectfully. But it's back to the drawing board and just see what works and what doesn't work. I'm not concerned in the slightest. It was bound to happen, and they're still 2-1. All right. They're still in a good spot. Now, before I close out today's episode and we compare the stats, let me tell you guys about Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93 of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. I've actually used Indeed before to book myself some play-by-play gigs, and I use it to this very day. Listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support my show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right. Let's compare the stats, give the Devils a letter grade, and get out of here. Shots on goal differential 24-22 in favor of the Devils. It just seemed like the Devils would shoot aimlessly at Hildeby, and as a result, Hildeby racked up his first career NHL win. And like I said in the first segment, just to add insult to injury, he is the third string goalie for this Maple Leafs team because Stolarz got the start in the previous game against the Canadiens, and Woll is on the IR. Especially in that third period, it just was pretty much a cat playing with a mouse, and Devils didn't really have that much energy go their way. There was nothing really to get excited for, and I saw a lot of people fleeing for the exits early. Power plays. Leafs were 0 for 2. Devils were 1 for 5, thanks to Jesper Bratt. Hits 31-11 in favor of the Devils. Like I said, I saw someone like Curtis Lazar assert himself physically and just trying to get out the gate strong. And I wish it was sort of reciprocal among some of his other teammates. Giveaways 21-18 in favor of the Devils. Takeaways 4-2 in favor of the Maple Leafs. Block shots 27-11 in favor of the Maple Leafs. Another big issue in this game for Devils, which is the Leafs were blocking a lot of their shots. They have to find those open lanes to give themselves better looks, and I'm sure Sheldon Keefe is going to talk about that in the next practice and break it all down. Time spent in the penalty box, 10-4 in favor of Toronto. All right, if I had to give the Devils a letter grade, I'm going to go easy on them since it's still early in the season. I will give them a C just because they did get a couple goals. And like I said, let's go a little easy on them. There's still some rust, and the Maple Leafs are a much tougher opponent compared to the Sabres, if we're being realistic here. The Sabres just lost their recent game to the LA Kings. Now they're 0-3 to start their season, and Lindy Ruff is still winless in his second stint as head coach for Buffalo. Anyway, that's what I'm going to give the Devils, a C for the time being. But as the season progresses, that grade probably dips a little bit more. But let me know what you guys think. What did you think of the home opener? What did you think of the Devils' overall effort? Were there any surprises that caught your eye? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment down below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on a podcast streaming service, hit me up on my personal X Page app at TreyMatt4 or the show's X Page app at Locked On Devils. As for today's episode, that's all the time I have for you. Continue to stay safe. Have a wonderful day, New Jersey. Go Devils. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Year 3 of me being credentialed. Let's make it a great year. I will go to as many games as I possibly can, and I enjoy getting behind the scenes sound bites for you guys. And I got a few more up my sleeve, but I will catch you guys in the next episode. Thanks for listening once again.